I was twiddling the dials of my radio and tuned into this station that featured Birdsong and stayed with it. The signal is really clear from the Cockhill Moor transmitter above Hebden Bridge, and the birdsong is wonderful to listen to. Jeff Boswell, Hebden Bridge. I wonder if any of your other readers have experienced the same thing on their radios in the last week. With the dial at about 102 FM on my car radio, I've been picking up what seems to be an outside broadcast. There's no talking on this station, just the peaceful sounds of birds singing, a sheep in the distance, and the occasional aircraft flying overhead. This seemingly goes on for hours, as I've turned on my radio to be greeted by the familiar robin song, the cooing of a pigeon, or the cawing of a crow many times this week. Is somebody sitting outside in a field with a microphone broadcasting this? Is it a practical joke? I'd be very grateful if somebody could explain this strange radio show, or if I could hear from anyone else who has experienced similar phenomena. Yours, Andrew in Sittingbourne. When I'm on the move in a car, I'm an inveterate button pusher, anxious to find music to soothe the traumas of the journey. Alas, there's usually an interminable babble of DJ voices and a racket which jangles my senses. Driving to work the other day, I whiled away the waits at traffic lights, idly pressing the self-selector buttons in the hope of finding something interesting and amusing. As the lights changed to green, the cab was suddenly filled with birdsong. The sunroof was open. Were the sounds emanating from outside? No, this was Blackpudlian suburbia, with not a tree in sight. The sounds were those of a woodland glade evoking tranquillity, mottled sunlight falling on bluebells, a robin trilling in the holly, the flutter of wood-pigeon wings. Was that a cuckoo in the middle distance? Then rooks cawing overhead. These marvellous sounds went on and on all the way to work. I felt totally refreshed, yet almost uplifted. I checked to make sure nobody had left a special tape in the slot. This was broadcast birdsong on 101.1 FM. Had I discovered a channel strictly for the birds? Had the Beeb, in bucolic mood, introduced a Twitchers channel in these ecologically correct days? Tasked around the office, everyone looked blank. Journalistic curiosity got the better of me. I rang the BBC in Manchester, and the super-efficient press officer called Miranda, what a lovely name, knew all about it, but only because a couple of days before she'd spotted something in one of the Sunday papers. Apparently, I was not alone in my search for the truth. The rural muzak had been heard and noted by the anoraks, who had written and phoned the radio authority by the dozen. These radio freaks, as one journal chose to dub them, are so called because of the type of coats they wear, the wireless equivalent of train spotters. So, what's the story behind these bird-brained broadcasts? Classic FM, that's what. They're test transmissions for Britain's first national commercial radio station, which goes on the air in September. Normally, test transmissions put out a tone noise, but Classic's consulting engineer Quinton Howard decided differently, opting instead for countryside sounds. It's nicer, he said. Of course it is, Quinton. It's a superb idea. Give me turtle doves before Tony Blackburn, nightingales before Noel Edmonds. If there are to be Twitterers on our airwaves, let them be of the feathered variety. It's all so soothing. Tune in to 101.1 and give yourself a tweet. Yours, Peter Myers Co. in Blackpool. The sound of the countryside had been baffling radio listeners trying to tune into a dance music station. They'd picked up birdsong and the noise of cows and sheep. The tweeting and twittering was heard between 100 and 102 MHz on the FM band by bewildered listeners trying to find dance music station Kiss FM. Now the mystery had been solved. The rural recording was a test transmission for Classic FM, the first national commercial radio station due to start in September 1992. Millions of listeners heard the continuous broadcast of birdsong, interrupted every 30 minutes by the required statutory announcements, also voiced by Quinton Howard. It was the first time anything like this had been heard on radio, and it immediately captured the attention of the press and public alike. Birdsong test transmissions turned out to be the best publicity Classic FM could have ever wished for, maintaining the secrecy and enigma of the new radio station whilst attracting much publicity. The recording was made by Quinton Howard, programme director for West Commercial Station GWR, which was a shareholder in Classic FM at his Wiltshire home. Howard, Classic's consulting engineer, recorded birdsong several years prior for his Amateur Dramatic Society production of Raymond Briggs's When the Wind Blows. The Wikipedia article on this test transmission states that it was recorded in spring 1991, and an old Telegraph article says spring 1992. The Dramatic Society production was in 1991, and so the recording had to be made in 1991 or earlier. Howard thought it would make a better test transmission than the usual tone noise that would have been relayed by 11 large transmitters nationwide. Using a portable DAT recorder, Birdsong and other country sounds were recorded over several days. Hours of recordings were digitally remixed to create a 40-minute audio soundscape, layers of sound upon sound capturing the calls and patterns of different birds and country images. The birdsong was punctuated by sharp cracking noises, which many listeners initially mistook for gunshots. In fact, they're the sound of wood cladding expanding in the autumn sun. Ornithologists began to telephone or write to the radio authority, giving their 2 cents on what the individual bird calls were, along with the area where the recording was made and the time of year. The authority was also inundated with letters and calls asking for copies of the tape, and even letters from prisoners saying that the birdsong reminded them of the outside world. Doctors and dentists used the station to create soothing atmospheres in waiting rooms, and tales of estate agents tuning in, opening the windows of houses and telling prospective buyers that the house was full of country air were also rife. An attempt by engineers in the BBC transcription department tried to upset the launch of Classic FM by claiming they could hear someone swearing in the distance. However, no swearing was ever found. From Wednesday the 2nd of September 1992, the Birdsong tape was taken off the air and replaced with classical music. In 1999, Quinton Howard created the UK's first national commercial DAB network, Digital One, and the Birdsong tapes were used again for a few weeks prior to launch. However, there were very few DAB radios back then, and so not many people heard the birds. In 2003, financial news station Bloomberg and news station ITN News Radio ceased broadcasting within several months of one another. Replacement audio services weren't found due to a commitment in Digital One's broadcast license to provide a news station. This resulted in a station playing a loop of birdsong and ambient sounds entitled D1 Temp, which continued for almost 2 years. In June 2005, the channel formerly used by the speech services and later by the Birdsong were replaced with a test transmission of video to mobile phones, known as BT Movio. The switch off of Birdsong triggered hundreds of complaints from listeners who enjoyed the tranquil broadcast. In 2008 and 2009, Birdsong was broadcast once again as a filler transmission until a commercially operated radio station, Amazing Radio, replaced it on June 1, 2009. This time, in a different era, it sparked a flood of online debate as Twitchers once again tried to identify the birds on the tape. The recording was being played by Digital One on the former One Word channel, a spoken word commercial channel which shut down in January 2008. Quinton Howard warned from the beginning that as soon as Digital One sold the unused channel to another broadcaster, the birds would fall silent once more, and he was fully anticipating uproar. He said he was open to offers from birdwatchers to maintain the service, but they'd have to raise the estimated £1 million a year cost of running a digital channel. Even if that was raised, the Birdsong would have to make way for adverts for sofas and mobile telephones every 6 minutes to be commercially viable. The recording was also available via the Digital One website until autumn 2009 and the Radio Birdsong website. There were rumours that it garnered 500,000 listeners. It was broadcast between 6 AM and midnight each day. In 2009, Glyn Jones, acting chief executive of Digital One, claimed that Birdsong had been more popular with journalists than real listeners, saying there was never any real evidence for the figure of 500,000 listeners. This makes sense, as Birdsong was never in radar, so there's no accurate listenership figures. He added, "When the channel went on air back in January 2008, we warned that the transmission could cease at any time. There's never going to be a good time to pull the plug on what some regard as a national treasure, but we're hoping that this time of year, many people will find an alternative by simply opening a window or taking a walk in the park or countryside." Its removal upset listeners, with suggestions to petition 10 Downing Street and bring back our Birdsong letters in the papers. Birdsong Radio made a temporary return to digital radio in January 2014, after Jazz FM ceased broadcasting on the Digital One platform, before LBC began airing nationally from February the 11th. On the 27th of December 2019, Birdsong returned to digital in the Portsmouth area on a small-scale DAB multiplex as a DAB Plus service. Birdsong Plus One was also on the multiplex. As far as I know, this was only a trial. On September 7, 2019, the original Birdsong soundtrack was released on Spotify to celebrate 27 years since the launch of Classic FM. On April 1st, 2020, Birdsong was also added to the Glasgow small-scale multiplex. Quentin Howard's recording has featured in a number of TV and radio reports, including Countryfile in 2008 and on BBC Breakfast Television. One slight mystery still remains, however, but it doesn't take much sleuthing to get to the bottom of. A Telegraph interview with Quentin Howard states Mr. Howard declined to say if the Birdsong was an 18-hour recording or looped every 10 minutes. He said, quote, "That would spoil the magic. For the moment, those who enjoy the sound of the countryside are jubilant." In my research for this video, just how long the recording was always a point of debate for some people in archived message boards. A full 18-hour recording has never been made public, although a 30-minute version exists as part of the 27th anniversary of Classic FM release. Radio buffs recorded the station, examined Birdsong, and confirmed in the mid-2000s that it was indeed a 36-minute, 54-second long recording that was looped. I even managed to find an hour-long original recording in which you can clearly hear the loop restart at the 36-minute 54-second mark. There were plans to release a CD of the recording, but to my knowledge this never happened, and email requests from potential customers were never answered. Unfortunately, it would appear that Quentin Howard never updated his website further after the mid-2000s, but Birdsong certainly went down in radio folklore.